The bakery was warm with the smell of fresh vanilla and melting chocolate, but the little girl standing outside pressed her face to the glass as if warmth were something she had long forgotten. Her shoes were too thin for the pavement, her sweater too light for the morning breeze, and beside her stood a man whose shoulders carried the quiet weight of 1,000 sleepless nights. When he finally stepped inside and asked the question that made the entire shop fall silent, "Do you have an expired cake for my daughter?" No one realized that a single sentence was about to change more than one life that bright, ordinary afternoon. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Whisper Tales 3. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the smallest acts can echo the loudest in someone's life. It was a clear daytime in early spring when the city seemed busy chasing its own ambitions. Inside the elegant bakery on Crescent Avenue, glass cases shimmered with perfectly frosted cakes, delicate pastries, and rows of colorful macarons arranged like edible jewels. The owner, Arman Qureshi, stood near the counter reviewing invoices, his tailored suit sharp, his watch gleaming under the lights. At just 38, Arman was a self-made millionaire who owned half a dozen businesses across the city. He was known for his precision, his discipline, and his refusal to tolerate inefficiency. He built his empire from nothing, and he never forgot the humiliation of being poor, though he had carefully buried the memory beneath years of success. When the door chimed and the man entered with his daughter, few paid attention at first. The father, Farid Ansari, looked worn beyond his years. His shirt was clean but faded, ironed carefully despite its fraying collar. The little girl, Syra, held his hand tightly, her dark eyes fixed on a pink cake decorated with tiny sugar butterflies. It was her 7th birthday. Farid had promised her a cake, and promises were the only wealth he still possessed. He approached the counter slowly, clearing his throat. The cashier greeted him politely, but her smile faltered when she saw him hesitate. Farid swallowed his pride and asked in a low voice if they had any expired cake, anything that would otherwise be thrown away, because he could not afford a fresh one. The words trembled not from shame alone, but from the fear of disappointing the small hand gripping his fingers. Several customers turned. A murmur rippled across the bakery. The cashier looked uncertain. The policy was clear, unsold cakes were discarded for safety reasons. She glanced toward Arman, who had overheard everything. For a moment, Arman felt irritation. He believed in systems, in margins, in maintaining brand prestige. Giving away expired cake could damage reputation. But as he looked at Syra's hopeful face, something in him shifted. He saw not a liability, but a reflection of someone he once knew, himself at 8 years old, standing outside a sweet shop, pretending he didn't want what he could never afford. Arman remembered his own father, a mechanic who worked until his hands cracked, who once asked a shopkeeper for leftover bread so his son wouldn't go hungry. He remembered how that shopkeeper had laughed. The memory stung like it had happened yesterday. Farid stood still, waiting for rejection. He had prepared himself for it. He had even practiced a gentle explanation to Syra about how birthdays were about love, not cake. But he could feel her tiny heartbeat through her hand, fast with anticipation. Instead of dismissing him, Arman walked toward the display case. He didn't say much. He simply asked Syra which cake she liked the most. She pointed shyly to the pink butterfly cake. Arman studied it for a second, then nodded to the staff. Within minutes, the cake was carefully boxed, fresh and perfect. Farid immediately began shaking his head, explaining that he couldn't pay for it. His voice cracked with embarrassment. Arman stopped him gently and told him it was already paid for. He said it was a promotional giveaway, something the bakery occasionally did for loyal customers. It was a small lie, crafted not to wound a man's dignity. Syra's eyes sparkled as if someone had turned on the sun inside them. She wrapped her arms around the box as though it were treasure. Farid tried to speak, to thank him, but words failed. The kind of gratitude that tightens your chest rarely finds language. But Arman wasn't finished. Something deeper had been awakened. He invited Farid to sit for tea. At first, Farid resisted, uncomfortable in a place that seemed built for people richer than his imagination. Yet Arman insisted. They sat near the window where daylight poured across the table. Farid spoke carefully at first, then more openly. He had once been a construction supervisor, but a workplace accident had injured his back. Medical bills consumed his savings. His wife had passed away 2 years earlier after a long illness. Now he worked odd jobs when he could, carrying pain in both his body and his heart. Today he had only enough money for bus fare and a small bag of candies. The cake had been a desperate hope. As Arman listened, the polished businessman began to fade, replaced by the boy who once understood hunger and humiliation. He realized that wealth had insulated him from the very struggles that once fueled him. He had built charities before, donated to causes, but those acts had been distant, abstract. This was different. This was human. That afternoon, Arman quietly asked for Farid's contact details. Within days, he arranged medical treatment through one of his company's healthcare partners. He offered Farid a managerial position at one of his warehouses, work that required supervision more than physical strain. It wasn't charity. It was opportunity. Farid tried to refuse at first, pride clashing with relief. But Arman made it clear that he valued resilience, and he saw it in Farid. Sometimes dignity is restored not by giving, but by trusting someone with responsibility. Weeks passed. Farid began working steadily. His posture improved, not just physically, but emotionally. Syra started attending a better school through a scholarship Arman funded discreetly. The bakery, too, changed. Arman implemented a new policy. Every evening, unsold but safe items were packaged and distributed to shelters and families in need. What began as a single request for an expired cake grew into a community initiative that fed hundreds. The city never knew the full story. Customers simply noticed that the Millionaire owner smiled more often, that the bakery felt warmer than before. On Cyrus' next birthday, the bakery hosted a small celebration in the afternoon sunlight. Balloons filled the corner by the window. Farid stood taller, healthier, tears shining openly in his eyes. Arman watched quietly from a distance as Syra blew out her candles, her laughter echoing like music. This time, there was no desperation behind the wish she made. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like, comment, and share it. Your engagement helps stories of hope travel further than we ever could alone. And before you go, comment, "Kindness lives," if you believe one small act can transform a lifetime. As the candles flickered out and daylight poured golden across the room, Arman realized something profound. Success had once meant numbers in accounts, properties acquired, markets conquered. But real wealth was measured differently. It was measured in dignity restored, in children smiling without fear, in fathers who no longer had to whisper painful requests. All because one day, a man asked for an expired cake, and someone chose to hear more than just the words.